Hey all, it's exciting to be here and to have you here with us. It's our second day of the Advice Residency Post-Match Financial Education Seminar. We've got a lot of topics to cover. Yesterday, we discussed federal student loans. We discussed private loans, cash flow, employee benefits, all sorts of fun stuff. And today, we're going to be venturing into some new topics. Financial advisors, how to vet them, laying a really great foundation for retirement planning, um, disability insurance. That's a really important one. Sounds boring, but it's really important. Um, the how to begin investing, and we're going to be talking about addressing major financial mistakes that are very common, and then we're going to be talking about uh, the the very common question: should interns buy a home or should they just rent? So, in order for us to get started, we're going to invite a good friend and certified financial planner, Courtney Randstrom, to the stage. She's going to be discussing the topic, sifting financial advisors, their qualifications, and their fees. Courtney, please take it away.
Thank you, Tyler. All right, I'm going to jump right in since we only have 20 minutes, but thanks to Tyler for putting this all together and his awesome assistant, Tori, who's making sure that the rest of us are not inept on the computer. Um, so what do I want you to take away from today? There's about three main points that I want to hit on. One, I'm going to talk about the five main fee models. Two, we're going to define fee only versus fee based. Three, I want to go over a little bit of our regulatory structure for advisors because I think that's helpful to understand when you're vetting advisors and when you're trying to figure out like why do they not charge a fee the way I want them to. And then the fourth thing is just a few resources to try to find an advisor, especially early on in your career. Okay, so let's jump right in. The I'm not doing slides, so this is just me talking. You're just gonna have to tolerate me. Um, so you can put questions in the question and answer box if you want to. You don't have to. I'll try to get to them. I will be in the breakout room after for about 8 or 9 minutes, but I have a 5:30 meeting because I'm on Pacific time. So it's earlier in the day for me. All right, five main fee models. The one you hear the most about is percent of assets under management. You invest your assets with an advisor and they charge a percent for asset management and often financial planning too, or they might be light financial planning rolled in, it kind of varies. Okay. That's the most common one. The common fee range is usually about 1% to 1.25%. Depending on how much in assets you have, and then it usually tiers down, starting at like 1 or 2 million. So they might charge 1% on the first 2 million, and then they'll charge 0.5% on the next 8 million, and then 0.25% after that. That's my firm's fee schedule anyway. It varies though. Okay. The second way is flat fee, billed either to assets or to the client. So you have an IRA with an advisor. They say my flat fee annually is $5,000. They're going to bill 4 times a year, 1/4 of that 5,000 4 times a year. And it's usually some sort of calculation based on net worth and income, but you don't, like that's usually proprietary to the advisor. So the range is really big on how advisors charge for flat fees. There's also project-based. So a client can say, hey, I want you to do a retirement analysis for me. I want the engagement to last 3 to 6 months. And at that point, it's done. I charge a flat fee for that. There's also the hourly option. So they might say, here's the work that I need to have done. An advisor can then say, okay, I charge $250 an hour, $350 an hour, etc. And then there's commission. So that's going to be your more standard, like life insurance salesman, folks who work for some sort of broker dealer, like think Edward Jones, Northwestern Mutual, Merrill Lynch. where they sell you a product and you are not paying them directly, you're not paying that advisor directly, they're getting commission on that product. So the fees are baked into the product. And sometimes it can be more expensive, and sometimes it actually isn't that much more expensive. I want to make it clear, and this is probably where I deviate from a lot of other advisors. There is no wrong way to charge a fee. There are advisors that overcharge and aren't doing enough work, but they can be flat fee advisors. Like you know, there's no like morality attached to this, right? You have to find the best advisor for you that makes sense for your finances. And the advisor's job is to set up a fee schedule that not only works for their clients, but it also allows them to be profitable so they can stay in business. Okay, so those are their goals. Let's talk a little bit about fee only versus fee based. This is really confusing. So, in our industry, if you are only paid by clients, then you are considered to be fee only. So that means that every dollar I earn comes directly from my clients, whether I'm billing their assets or they're just paying me directly out of cash flow. Okay, so I'm a fee only firm. I'm a registered investment advisor, registered with the SEC. We manage about $125 million. Um, oh, talked about five. Hourly. Hourly based fees is the fifth one. So we we only earn income based on what our clients pay us. Okay. If you're fee based, it usually means you're some sort of hybrid model where you might sell life insurance, you might sell some products, variable annuities or whatever, and get a commission for that. But then you also have advisory accounts that your clients pay you directly. When you are working with a registered investment advisor, they are required to be a fiduciary. Okay. If you are working with a fee-based advisor, they're not necessarily required to be a fiduciary. It depends in what capacity they are working. So if they are working as a advisor that is billing you directly, then they need to be operating as a fiduciary and working in your best interest. If they are not, if they're just selling you a product, they don't necessarily need to be a fiduciary. So the difference between a fiduciary and then we have the suitability clause is a fiduciary is someone who needs to work in your best interest. As a client, they need to put aside any like of their conflicts of interest or whatever that may be and say, okay, I am here for the client. And sometimes that means, it can often mean that what is best for the client is not the most profitable for the advisor. So let's give you an example. If I have a 401k that my advisor says, hey, can you let's roll that into an IRA, you're leaving that job. But I want to leave backdoor Roths open for myself, so I can't have a sizable IRA. I don't want to have any money in a traditional IRA. Okay. At that point, if the advisor says no, like I move it into an IRA, like they're putting their own interests in front of mine. They're saying I want to be able to bill on those accounts, and that is not operating as a fiduciary. People do this obviously, but this is not how you should operate. Okay. The best advice is to say, hey, send that over to a 401k, roll that into your next employer's 401k, leave your IRA balance at zero, and keep the backdoor Roth option open. Okay. If you're confused on the backdoor Roth thing, ask Tyler later. He knows about it. But anyway, that's an example of advisors wanting to say like collect assets because they know they can bill more the more assets that they have. Whereas, if you roll it into a 401k, the advisor can't manage that, they're not billing on that account. Okay. One thing that I think is also really critical to understanding is that advisors, and you will know this because you're in medicine, Advisors are heavily regulated, and our regulatory structure favors the AUM model. It favors the percent, billing a percent of assets under management. So if you have $500,000 to invest with an advisor, they're going to charge, say, 1% on that money or 1.25% on that money. And regulators like that. We are all audited usually once every about 3 years. Okay. And it depends how big you are in determining who your regulator is. So if you have less than 100 million in assets under management, you are regulated by the state in which you founded your company. So for us, I'm based in Portland. My business partners are based in Minneapolis, but I started the company in Portland. So we were regulated by Oregon. Okay. Once you reach $100 million in assets under management, then you're regulated by the SEC, which is just easier for everyone. The problem with being state regulated is that the states all have different rules. And some states hate anything other than percent of assets under management. So they take a state like Utah, Missouri is a bit like this as well. Washington is this way. Oregon is moving in this direction. And they say, okay, if you want to be an advisor, you have to charge a percent asset under management fee. We don't want you charging a flat fee. If you do charge a flat fee, you need to prove that you are doing enough hourly work to justify your flat fee. Okay. So it is incredibly frustrating because the fee models that regulators favor are not the fee models that consumers want. Okay. What can you do? Fortunately, you can find advisors elsewhere. Like, you don't have to work with an advisor in your state. If you were based in Utah and you want hourly financial planning advice, I probably wouldn't even look for a local advisor because they probably can't do it. I think Utah set a cap of like $150 an hour. And that's like that's just not enough of a high enough hourly rate to justify all of the education and background work that goes into building a financial plan for someone. So I think, when you're looking for an advisor, I do think it is important to consider fees, but I also want to make sure that you're really thinking through who's going to be the best fit and does that make sense for you. So most of you all are coming out of med school, you're not going to be doing, you're not going to be looking for advisors that are charging an AUM fee because you don't have much in assets to manage, right? I work with younger physicians, and I charge a flat annual fee paid quarterly for the work that we do. So where can you find these advisors? There's a few resources. So you can go to napfa.org, napfa.org. They have a find an advisor website. You can go to xyplanningnetwork.com. They also have a find an advisor website. Can I put these in the chat, Tyler?
But I think you can. We can also put in a simple a Google Doc or something and put it into the resources tab. So, but
Okay.
for now, just put it in the chat and then we can add it there for sure.
Thank you. There's also smartasset.com that advisors use, and advisors pay for the service to help them kind of use it as a way to get linked up with possible clients, with prospects. And so the questions that you want to ask when you're interviewing an advisor: one, what are your qualifications? Okay. Two, how do you charge? And three, do you work on a project or hourly basis? Because early on in your career, you may not need any ongoing planning. Okay. I know plenty of people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s that don't need ongoing planning, but they do need someone to check things over or to review or just give them a second set of eyes. Okay. So ask them if they do project based work. And then you also want to see what is their demographic that they work with. Okay. So if you get referred to an advisor, you find an advisor that you think, great, they're in my area, I want to work with this person. Um, you know, like who is their current client? Ask them about that. Because if someone says, oh, I work with people who are age 60 plus and entering retirement and have come from the tech sector, like that is, they're not going to understand what you need. They're because they probably haven't looked at a student loan in years, right? They work with pre-retirees and retirees. Okay. So you need to find people that work with younger advisors, or sorry, work with younger clients, understand student loans, understand what it's like to have high income, high debt, and and then also understand what it's like to go from earning not very much to earning a lot. So really good question. When would a resident choose to seek out an advisor versus manage things on their own? I want to make it really clear. What we do as advisors, we're not special. Okay. Like anyone can do this work. It's just basic, it's math, right? Like anyone is smart enough to do this work. The trick is, do you have the time and do you have the will? Do you want to do this work? All my ongoing clients, I call them my delegators because they don't want to deal with this shit. Like they don't want to rebalance their accounts. They don't want to spend 3 hours on a Friday figuring out like how they're going to get tax locations set up. They don't, want to like go through their capital gains. They don't want to harvest losses. They don't want to do their tax plan for the year. I'm doing all of that for them. They want to delegate it out. Okay. But so you can do all of these things. I think if you have a really, really good foundation, it is possible to go a while without having an advisor. And, into your 20s, 30s, maybe even your early 40s, if you have an aggressive debt payoff plan, if you are doing what you can to save as much as you can in your 401k or 403b, and then if you keep a good emergency fund, that kind of stuff, like, and then in your first couple of years as an attending, if you just are aggressively paying down debt, I think it's possible to go a little while without it. Renting versus buying during residency, I'm a terrible person to ask on that because I think that homeownership is just like a crock of shit. Like the only reason I own a home with my husband is because we have kids and they just like ruin everything. Um, the other like home ownership is just like such a money suck and it's a time suck. If I were single and didn't have kids, I would just like live in a condo and travel the world and just be happy. So it's great if like for a lot of things, but I don't think home ownership is all that it's cracked up to be. So there's a lot of invisible costs with home ownership, especially if you're only going to live there for a few years. But I'm kind of jaded on it, so I'm probably not the person to ask. Some people are like really into real estate, and that's just like not where I I think you can build a lot of wealth without ever delving into real estate. Okay, my time is just about up. So remember, ask people, how do you charge? Okay. And the big piece is find a good fit for you. Interview 5 advisors, interview 7 advisors if you can do that. Okay. You're going to be having very vulnerable, deep conversations with these people. Find someone that works for you. All right. I flew through that. And I
Excellent.
swore. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Courtney. And thank you for telling us how you feel about home ownership. I had to buy new windows like 3 months after we moved into this place. So,
Oh my gosh.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but there's so many intangibles. And there's a lot that goes into it that is
There's
very
yeah, a
personal.
lot of decision factors that go into it. We're on like our third or fourth dishwasher because we just like can't keep them alive. So I don't know. We're broken, man.
Well, thanks for sharing some of those things. It was It was good to get your perspective. As you can all see, like the financial advisory industry is very complex, and so take your time. Like better to wait if you're not really certain on what you should do versus, just like jumping in rashly. It's
Yeah.
good to be shrewd about this.
Yeah, and never buy whole life insurance.
Yeah, I mean, from a broad brush stroke perspective, yeah. Every time I say that, people are like, "Well, there are exceptions," and there are, but generally, don't. All right,
Yep.
now we're gonna continue with our next speaker. But if you have any questions for Courtney, Courtney is going to go into her breakout room like we did last night, and you're welcome to go over there to ask her questions that you want to ask specifically. So thanks again, Courtney. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
So now, next is friend and Dr. Jimmy Turner. He's going to be talking about disability insurance. I know he's going to be talking about a lot about GSI, and I'm going to let him explain what GSI stand for and other considerations for graduating med students and interns. So, Jimmy, we're looking forward to your part. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tyler. Super excited to be here and to discuss this topic with you. So I'm gonna go ahead and share. This is gonna be a little bit different, kind of sharing from a single camera here. But we're gonna talk about asset protection. So as Tyler said, I'm Jimmy Turner. So for those of you know me, I'm from the Physician Philosopher, Money Meets Medicine, and I'm gonna talk to you about what I think is arguably the most important financial topic for physicians, and we'll talk about why in a second. But you might be wondering why I'm an academic anesthesiologist for those that don't know my background. And you might be wondering, like, why in the world is a random doctor talking to me about disability insurance? What is my road into, personal finance? And so, in order to answer that question, kind of have to take you back a little bit. When I was a fourth year medical student, my wife and I, we had our first kid. She's about to turn 13 in like a couple weeks, which is insane, to be honest with you. And when we had Grace, we decided to, hashtag adult and, be adults and go get life insurance. Didn't know who to talk to. Did know enough back then, know not to buy whole life insurance. So I'll plug that too. But ended up having a medical school classmate of mine say, "Hey, well, my brother's an insurance agent. So why don't you go and talk with him?" And I said, "Okay, that sounds great. I know nothing about personal finance at this point. I wouldn't know anything about personal finance for another, 5 or 8 years." And talk to him, and he's like, "Yeah, we can get you term life insurance, but while you're looking, you should also consider getting disability insurance." Again, I know nothing about money. Probably like many of you that are attending this, right? Fourth year med student. I don't know anything about it. Don't have an income. Doesn't make sense to me. Long story short, I have an essential trimmer. I take propranolol. He ended up talking me into applying for the disability insurance. And I went through what was called a fully underwritten process, meaning that they looked through my medical exams, my medical history. They got an attending physician statement from the doc that had seen me a few times when I was in training. And long story short, I got denied. Okay, and it didn't seem like honestly that big of a deal at the time because I didn't know enough about this stuff. But when I'd get to training, if the insurance agent had done what was right for me, they would have said, "Hey, if you wait till you get to training, there's something called a guaranteed standard issue policy, a GSI, that Tyler alluded to a minute ago. We'll talk more about this, answer lots of questions about it. But the guaranteed policy is essentially guaranteed if you haven't been disabled and you haven't been denied." And so, since I got denied as a fourth year medical student who had no business applying for disability insurance, to this day, I still can't get disability insurance because the GSI policy available to me at Wake Forest, where I wasn't training, um, basically those were the two stipulations, and I had violated one of them because I had applied for disability insurance, got denied, and that didn't have to happen. If I'd waited till training, I could have gotten disability insurance. And so this entire talk today, I'm going to talk to you about the process that we use to basically walk clients through. And basically, I don't care where do you get your disability insurance. I know that I'm going to be speaking with you today. Michael Relvis, who's fantastic, is going to be chatting tomorrow. And so there's going to be lots of opportunities to learn about this. But ultimately, my entire goal is to basically prevent what happened to me from happening to any of you. That is my North Star, my mission. The entire reason I'm in this space is to protect physicians from bad experiences like what I had. So we're going to dive back into this and chat through it. I'm big on disclosures. I know that Tyler is as well. So Money Meets Medicine is a podcast that I run, the Physician Philosopher, a business that I own. I make money from both of those things. I'm not a certified financial planner, an analyst, a realtor, a broker. I am, however, a licensed insurance agent. And so I want to put that out there just to be explicitly clear about those disclosures. I'm an academician, so I have to give that for every talk that I ever give. So in my opinion, and this is broad strokes, very, very broad strokes, there are 3 financial tasks for physicians in training. In my opinion, top 3: create a student loan plan for the 80% of you that have student loans. I know y'all chatted about that yesterday. Own occupation disability insurance. We'll talk about that right now. And then ideally, you build an emergency fund. If you have more money, you can do other things that are outside this list of 3. But we're going to talk about this second one, own occupation disability insurance. And as we talk about that, there's an important thing to mention, which is that the way that disability insurance is sold in the United States of America, there is a commission that is paid to the insurance agent that you buy that insurance from, no matter how you do it. Okay. So someone's being paid a commission. That's important because, Courtney just talked about the, fee only versus fee based. And the fee-based advisors that make, insurance commissions, you need to know that if you're buying an insurance product from them, even if they're a financial advisor, they're making money off the commission. If you buy, from a licensed insurance agent that doesn't do financial advising, who tries to separate those 2 worlds, you're in a fee-only advisory relationship. They recommend you get disability insurance. The disability insurance agent's still going to make commission. That's just the way that it works. You can't really dodge that conflict of interest or that incentive that exists there. So that's really important to just kind of have a lay of the land in terms of how that works in our country. It is highly important to recognize that working with an independent agent, in my opinion, is extremely important. And the reason why is because if someone's captive to a specific company, they are then going to be incentivized and conflicted to sell the products from that specific company. And so, I think it's highly important to work with someone that can offer you quotes from all of the companies we're going to talk about here momentarily. And then to answer the question there, so any thoughts on Emeritus versus Principal for disability insurance? They're both one of the 5 own occupation specialty specific disability insurance companies. And so you're going to have to look into the specific offerings in each of the policies there and then compare the price as well. But both of them offer own occupation disability insurance. And so they are good companies, quote unquote. So best way to get disability insurance so that what happened to me doesn't happen to you. That's what we're going to talk about. And before we do that, I have to define a couple of things because this is really, really confusing for a lot of people. So very broad strokes. I'll try to fly through this because you'll get a copy of these slides. But disability insurance, there's 2 big pictures. So group and employers. So we can consider that as like your group policy provided by your employer, or say the American Medical Association or the American Surgical, Association, big associations that offer group policies to their, members or employees. That is different than an individual policy that you buy personally that's not provided by one of those groups that protects you outside of a large group or employer plan. The group or employer plan provides some basic coverage. It doesn't have an own occupation definition a lot of the time. That's not always true, but a lot of the time that is true. And then it can have limited coverage. It can be canceled at any point. Your employer or the American Medical Association, whoever, can say, hey, we're just going to get rid of this benefit. We can't afford it anymore. We want to cut down on costs. And then it's just gone. Okay. It is paid pre-tax by your employer. So the benefit that you get is taxed before you get it. And then it's not portable. It doesn't come with you. So if you leave that group or you leave that policy, go somewhere else, it is not going to come with you. That is different than an individual plan, which does come with you. It is portable. And it is also something that can provide the difference in coverage between your group policy and your individual policy. You want those 2 things to stack up and to basically allow you to continue the lifestyle that you have right now later if you get disabled, right? You want to bring home the same amount of money you make now then if you get disabled. And any money that you receive is tax-free. And the reason why is because you're using post-tax dollars to pay for your individual policy that was purchased outside of your employer or outside of those large groups that you're inevitably going to get in the mail. Please buy our disability insurance policy. They'll talk about this amazing thing. We'll talk about why it's not so amazing in a second. That said, there are 2 kinds of individuals. So you have group, you've got individual, and then there's 2 kinds of individuals. We've already talked about one, which is the guaranteed standard issue policy. The second is the fully underwritten policy. In the guaranteed standard issue policy, there's no medical exam. It's a streamlined purchase process. The GSI that exists at your training program is the same for everybody at the program that buys that specific GSI. And it's only available to you when you are in training. This is the reason that this talk is so important, and it shouldn't bore you to death, is because the GSI plan that exists at medical training institutions for residents and fellows only exists when you're in training. I get emails that are heartbreaking all the time that 12 months after someone graduates, they say, Jimmy, I need disability insurance. I've got type 1 diabetes. What do I do? And it's like, well, at this point, you're pretty uninsurable because you have type 1 diabetes. You should have gotten the GSI plan when you were in training. Hey, Jimmy, I've got a cancer diagnosis or this autoimmune disease, or hey, I've got these 4 orthopedic surgeries that I've had. What should I do? Okay. You should have gotten the GSI. And so if you have that medical history, it's really important because the fully underwritten policy is going to look into your medical history. It is going to really go through a fully underwritten process where they take a peek at everything. And with that full medical assessment, they are taking less risk. So there's some more customization. It can be less expensive sometimes. And so if you can get a fully underwritten policy, there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, there's some benefits to doing that, but you just want to make sure you don't go that route and get denied if you have a GSI available to you. Okay. Someone asked, thoughts on AMA's Young Physicians Plan? We had a group plan with them during medical school, and we're encouraged to convert this into an individual plan during residency. So the AMA is typically, the last time I looked, is from New York Life. You'll see here in a second that that's not one of the plans, one of the companies that offers own occupation disability insurance. And so for a variety of reasons, including the AMA can just get rid of the plan if they want to. I'm not a huge fan of it being the only plan that you have. That said, there are going to be some options we'll talk about here in a second. And then I'm going to answer those next two questions live momentarily. So from the anonymous attendees there. So big pictures, two different types. Group, you don't own it. They can cancel it at any time. The definition is often not as good. So, disability definition is really important. Michael's going to really hammer this home tomorrow. I'll mention it too. The policies can be canceled. If you make outside money outside of medicine, they can deduct that from what they pay you. For an individual policy, none of that's true. It comes with you. It can't be canceled so long as you pay your premiums. It's got a strong disability definition. If you make outside income, it often won't count against you when you're being paid your disability benefit should you get disabled. So let's talk through this real quick. Going to fly through this process. And if you do this, you will not have what happened to me happen to you. All right. So would you recommend getting the group employer coverage until right before graduating? That's a really good question. I'll answer that one here in a second too. The answer is that you should probably purchase disability insurance the moment that you can, because the younger you are, the healthier you are, the lower the rates are. And fitting it into your budget is generally speaking a really good idea. You're not guaranteed the GSI program that you have at your training program is going to exist a year, 2 years from now. They change all the time. It was Ohio National when I first started. Now it's Guardian at Wake Forest. And so it's not a guaranteed thing that it'll still be there. So as soon as you can afford it, that's my recommendation. That said, theoretically, if the program still existed when you finished training, you could get it at the last day of training. That said, you're taking some risk rolling the dice there and doing that. So let's work through this. Do you have a past medical history? If the answer is yes, and it's significant, your insurance agent can tell you if it's significant or not. You need to go ahead and secure that guaranteed standard issue policy that says, as long as you haven't been disabled, as long as you haven't been denied, you're good to go. I'm going to ask you twice because it's important, but if you have that in hand, great. You can proceed. If you don't, then you really need to go back and get the GSI. But once you have a GSI in hand and you're making payments, you could consider doing a fully underwritten policy. Although a lot of the time, the GSI policy by itself is sufficient. It's very good. It will cover what you need when you are in that situation of being disabled. GSIs get a lot of the work done and are very, very good for a lot of people. That said, if you're completely healthy, you don't have a past medical history, pursuing a fully underwritten policy from one of the big 5 companies we'll talk about in a minute is very reasonable because it is customizable. Sometimes it is less expensive. It does provide potentially higher coverage for those that are working in higher paying specialties. For a variety of reasons, a fully underwritten policy may be beneficial to you and worth pursuing if you don't have a past medical history. I'm not going to dive into the riders here because I know Michael's going to be talking about this tomorrow. But suffice it to say, there are certain riders that you want to consider adding to your disability plan. GSIs, they have what they have. You can't change it. It's not customizable. But for a fully underwritten policy, having a cost of living adjustment, having the ability to purchase more disability insurance when you finish training and you have a higher income, those are really, really important things that you need to be aware of. And having that future purchase option, sometimes called a benefit increase option or future increase option, benefit purchase rider, goes by a variety of terms, is extremely important. So you get the fully underwritten policy from the big 5. If you don't have past medical history, or if you feel like looking around, if you have a GSI and you want to consider doing that to customize it or see if something's less expensive, either way, you want to make sure that your group policy and your individual policy, which can be a GSI or a fully underwritten policy, that those two things, when you add them together, add up to what you currently take home right now with your paycheck. Your goal is to essentially be able to cover whatever income you would lose from your disability. If you have done that, then your assets are protected. You've won the game. You've accomplished your goal. You've done what you're supposed to do. If you haven't, you need to go buy more insurance, right? You don't want to bring home $15,000 a month as an anesthesiologist, get disabled, and then now you're bringing home 10. You've got 3 kids and, you want to save for college. And by the way, your disability insurance will stop paying you by a certain age. So you need to be able to save for retirement and accomplish all of the same financial goals. By the way, I'm just describing my life in case you're curious. You need to be able to do that, right? That's the ideal situation. Now, if you're like me and you don't have disability insurance because you did it wrong, because you waited to, after training and didn't get the GSI and you should have, then that's an entirely different ball game. And honestly, it's a very uncomfortable place to be. I can tell you from personal experience, if I get disabled even to this day, like it'd be a financial catastrophe for my family. So all that said, own occupation, talked about this a lot. It'll be hammered home tomorrow in Michael's talk. But suffice it to say, you want to get paid if you are not doing the exact thing that you were doing the day before you got disabled. You want to get paid for that. You don't want to be a surgeon who's told, hey, can't you still work in clinic if you lost that arm in that terrible car accident? Like you can still make money from clinic, right? And then as a surgeon, you're like, yeah, but I make 80% of my money from doing surgery. You want to get paid for what you specifically do. And an own occupation definition is what gets that job done, which is unable to perform the material and substantial duties of your occupation. These are the 5 companies that offer own occupation disability insurance. Ohio National used to be one of them. They've kind of gotten out of the game. And so Emeritus, Guardian, Mass Mutual, Principal, Standard. Someone asked a question about the, two companies earlier. There are other people not on this list. There's a variety of reasons for that. I'm happy to answer in the breakout Q&A session, but suffice it to say, these are the 5 that you are looking for, and you want an agent that can show you quotes from all 5. So what would that actually look like? I'm going to take my face off the screen here so you can actually see this. In this, just illustration here, this is for, a resident, 29-year-old North Carolina neurology resident. And basically what they're looking at is a benefit of getting $5,000 per month should they become disabled. You can see some of the prices on the screen. They're going to be different for you based on your situation and what you have going on, your medical history, the whole 9 yards. A Guardian GSI is what's available for this specific resident at this specific residency. The GSI is not always Guardian. Sometimes it's Emeritus, sometimes it's others. You need to know that the GSI is different from every institution. Should you have questions about that, I'm happy to look into it and see if there's a GSI where you work. But this kind of gives you a ballpark for how much disability insurance is going to cost. Somewhere between $130 to $200 a month, so that if you get disabled, you get paid $5,000 a month up to the age of 65. Okay. Now, these are options that are provided for a resident. This is an example of a 33-year-old Florida attending radiation oncologist. And you're going to notice that there's going to be, similar benefits for the $5,000. They could have gone up higher should they want to. And I think this actually was a radiation oncologist that was going to become an attending. So these are actually still residency numbers that are offered here. But again, it kind of gives you an idea of, where you are in the ball game in terms of affordability for when you're in training. I encourage you to work this into your budget because it's so important and because of the reasons that I just mentioned a minute ago. But you'll have these slides, you'll have this recording. You can refer back to this and have an idea of where you're going to be. And just as a reference, this is the GSI questionnaire. You can basically see that, when you look at this, it says, have you in the last 6 months been disabled, or unable to, perform work? Have you lost both hands and your feet? Have you received medical treatment? Have you been able to unable to perform your ADLs? It's very specific. Basically, have you been disabled? And that's basically the limit of the questions. Most programs have a GSI. There are not published lists all over the place. And they change constantly, which is why it's hard to have a running list. If you have questions about whether a GSI exists at your specific institution, where you'll be training or where you are training, if you happen to be an intern or resident watching this, feel free to reach out. Happy to answer the questions, point you in the right direction, make sure that you are, taken care of. And I know Tyler is probably more than able and likely to do the same thing if you feel more comfortable reaching out to Tyler. All right. And then last comment I'll make, because I know I'm running up on time. Please be honest when you're doing a disability insurance application. Sometimes people will say, hey, I'm going to try to, sneak this one through. I know I saw that one doctor, 5 years ago for that one MRI, but they're probably not going to find it. If you have something, just assume that they will find it. I cannot tell you unfortunate circumstances and stories where somebody basically didn't fess up to something, or they forgot about this one, exam that they had 4 years ago, and it ends up getting them an exclusion, on their policy, or a straight up denial. So please, please, please be honest when you're going through the disability insurance process so that people can make sure that you don't get denied. That is really important. So if you take nothing else away, make sure you get disability insurance when you're in training so that if you need the GSI, not everybody does need a GSI, but if you do, it is available for you. And Tyler, I'll stop there because I know that I'm trying to keep it to 20 minutes exactly. So I think I did that. I know there's some questions too that I didn't answer, so maybe I can answer those in the Q&A room because there's a lot. I think you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate your punctuality. I know it's challenging. There's a lot of detail.
Big cover.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot to talk about. Um, I know the GSI uh list is always expanding. As of like 2 months ago, I made a list and I'm gonna put it, actually I'm gonna ask Tori if she can put it in the resource tab.
Perfect.
It's just a list, like a running list of all the programs that I know of that currently offer a GSI. So you can check that out. Oh yeah, Tori says it's in there now.
Perfect.
Um, and so yeah, so that was awesome. Thank you, Jimmy. We appreciate you being open about your own experience and education. So if any of you would like to ask Dr. Turner further questions, he's going to go into his breakout room now, and you can move yourself over there to ask further questions. And yeah, thanks so much, Jimmy. It was
Perfect.
really, really nice to hear you talk about this.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
All right. And so next is Dr. Nee. I am so excited to hear your part. You always have so much energy. You know, you and I, we did that podcast like 2.5 years ago, and I was like so energized after that. So I am so grateful that you were willing to come talk with all of us today. Um, Dr. Nee Darko, he's a trauma surgeon, also an entrepreneur and a podcaster, and he has a lot of experience to share. He's going to be discussing with you how to lay a good foundation for retirement planning. So please, Dr. Nee, take it away.
Hey, Tyler, thank you for having me here. Listen, the reason I have all this energy is because I'm a trauma surgeon. I'm up all times of the night, so I better have the energy, right? So I'm excited to be here. And as I said earlier, before everybody got on, I was telling Tyler, where were you like 20 years ago? Because I learned all of this stuff through the School of Hard Knocks. And based off of the schedule of what people are talking about today, I can tell you all the mistakes that I made, and I can tell you all the issues that I had with investing and all the things that I didn't do. But I'm gonna get into my story. I'm gonna share my screen, and I'm gonna try to keep it to 20 minutes, everyone, because today we're gonna be talking about, or at least right now, I'm gonna be focusing on laying the foundation for retirement. And I want you guys to really focus on the bottom part, even as a broke resident, right? Because I was there. By the time I was getting ready to transition into residency, I was living off credit cards. I was living off of my refund check. If you know what I'm talking about, go ahead and put that in the chat. If you know what I'm talking about, you can't wait to start your residency so you can get that first check. But that's kind of where I was. I am one half of a podcast duo called Docs Outside the Box. My wife, Dr. Renee, she's an OB doc, and literally my better half. She's the special sauce that keeps the show together. But we were both in the same boat at one point, right? And you guys who are watching may be in that same situation right now. So listen, let's jump right into this, okay? So as you guys are transitioning into residency, and once again, congratulations to everyone who's going to be transitioning. As you're transitioning right now, you're probably going to be thinking about some expenses that you have in mind. At least that's what I was, right? I was thinking about where I'm going to live. And one of the things that it's really interesting that we're going to be talking about later on is, should you rent or should you own? Well, me, I decided to go ahead and own. And to be honest with you, straight to the point, I bought a house that I could not afford. I got a house that, in essence, made me house poor, right? But for you guys, you may be thinking about that. Should I get a house or should I rent? And either way, you're going to need some type of money to fork over to get into that spot. That might be either a down payment, that might be a security deposit. You also may need to just, try to figure out, well, should I get a mortgage or should I rent? These are all things that you have to have in your mind. Okay. For me, I didn't have to put down a down payment. This is 2006, pre 2008 crash, and probably got too much of a house that I really could afford. Let's leave it to you like that. The next thing that you may have in mind is some household items. You got to put stuff into the house or into your apartment, right? There's going to be appliances that you're going to need to get. You're going to need to get some household items. For me, once again, because literally almost 70% of my paycheck from residency was going towards my home, I literally was house poor. And the best that I could have was I had a couch that I brought from medical school, that was a hand-me-down. I had a like a little foldable like card poker table that was my dining room table. I had a TV, and I had a bed, and that was it. And it took me 5 years to kind of slowly but surely build up some furniture so that I could have my parents come by and sit down. It was that bad, right? And then the next thing also too is if you got a hoopty, you really gonna know what I'm talking about. You got to decide if you're gonna keep your car because you don't want it breaking down as you're going into residency, or if you can get by on the current car that you have. So one thing to consider is a portion of your paycheck going to go into transportation. And then once you get there, for the most part, the majority of your academic resources are going to be taken care of, but you may need to purchase some textbooks. You may need to purchase some equipment for the specific specialty that you're going to be going into. But these are just a list of some of the expenses that you may have in mind. But I bet you one thing that you don't have on your mind that you weren't thinking about, because I know I wasn't thinking about, is how will you get paid when you retire? How many of you all are thinking about that right now? If you all are thinking about that, as someone is thinking about that right now, put a hands up, put it in the chat. Let me know if you're even thinking about that, because that's a lot already on this previous screen to be thinking about. And now all of a sudden you got to think about, what are you talking about when I'm in my 65 and I'm 70? Like, I don't have time for all that, right? Well, I'll tell you why you need to think about it. So that's my wife. That's me. That's right after we got married, maybe a couple of years into being married. Two attendings, as I said before, my wife is an OB. I'm a trauma surgeon. We living in the present, not necessarily planning for the future, because both of us had a total of about $700,000 in student loan debt. That's combined, right? We had $700,000 in student loan debt. And to be honest with you, we were making a great salary, right? 2 six-figure salaries, but not a cent was going towards retirement. It was going towards loan payments. And at some point it was going towards whole life insurance, which is another presentation, but not a cent was going towards retirement. And that was a problem for us, right? And what we learned quickly after that is, if you're not planning for retirement, I'm going to be really honest with you, you are planning to work. Now, some of you all may be like, yeah, like I got into this for lifelong learning. Like I want to be a doctor. But the question is do you want to be doctoring when you're in your 70s? Do you want to be doctoring when you're in your 80s, right? I'm not talking about like part-time, or emeriti position. I'm talking about, like you got to work. Otherwise, like, you may not be able to make ends meet, that type of work, right? I don't think anybody here wants to deal with that. But if you don't make a plan, you can't just rely on the fact that, well, I'm a doctor, I'm making 6 figures, I'll eventually figure it out. That's a really, you don't want to be in that position. I'll leave it to you like that. So I always tell people, if you're not planning for retirement, you're planning to work, and you got to have an end in sight, right? So that's me in residency. I'm all happy. I lost my hair because, residency got me like that. But when I look back on things, this was the time for me to actually start planning for retirement. This was the time for me to actually take some chances, because this was when I had a 5-figure salary, right? And when I was back here, I had a 6-figure salary, and I was really gun shy to make some moves at this point with my money, because I really felt like I would make many big mistakes in terms of what should I do with my retirement or planning for that. When I was here, you can make some mistakes, right? You have time to recover from that. So I always tell everyone, including you all watching right now, residency, this is the time, this is the place. A lot of you all, this is your first time getting a paycheck ever. And I know you may be even in your late 20s or, your early 30s, and this is your first job. It was for me. This is a great time to start planning for retirement. So let's start off. I'm going to give you guys 4 easy ways to start investing for retirement. And the key thing is, yes, even as a broke resident, it's very important to understand that. And, because this presentation, I'm trying to keep it 20 minutes or less, I'm doing 30,000 foot view for everything. This is all mindset. There's going to be some great presenters who are going to go into the specifics of this, but this is just something for you to start thinking about, as you're starting to get into the stride of becoming a resident doctor, getting a persistent paycheck, and starting to figure out, what should I do with that paycheck, right? So number one thing, I think one of the best ways to start is at your residency program, they probably have something that's called a 403B program or a 401k program. In essence, what this is your residency has a program where you can take a portion of your salary, divert it into a program that the residency program has, and you can invest your money in the stock market or in some type of fund where that money will grow at a certain rate. While you're operating, while you're writing HMPs, while you're sleeping, this money is growing for you. Okay. So this is either a 403B plan, even maybe at your residency program. It may not even be that specific. They may say something called like a cash balance plan, right? But that in essence is the same thing. You're going to find out about this program at your human resources. So you need to go to human resources and say, knock, knock. Hey guys, I want to know about a 403B program or the 401k or whatever the cash balance program, whatever program that you have where I take a portion of my salary and put it and invest it for later on down the line. I need to know more about that, right? And that's going to be some pre-tax money. That's pre-tax money. That's money before it gets taxed. And that's very important for tax purposes. Another place where you can start investing as a resident is something that's called a Roth IRA. You may have heard this a bunch of times. Roth IRA. It's a buzzword now. So a Roth IRA is basically a retirement plan that you start on your own, right? The 403B program, that is a retirement plan that your residency has started. A Roth IRA is something that you started, like you are taking your money, you go to a bank or a financial firm, or you go to whoever has a Roth IRA and you start this up on your own, right? And when you get your paycheck, after the government, Uncle Sam robs you, and after FICA comes after you, there's going to be a portion for you to live off of. And you're going to take a small portion of that amount of money, and you're going to go ahead and start this IRA and start putting money in, right? In order to find that out, right, where you're going to go and find it out, you're going to go to a local bank, you're going to go to a financial firm, you may even go to your credit union to find out about that. That's one thing to be thinking about also. Another thing is what's called a health savings account, right? A health savings account is, well, let's take a step back. Every residency program that is out there is going to be offering health insurance, right? That just comes with the territory. You're going to have health insurance. Now, there's different tiers of health insurance, but if you get one tier of health insurance called a high deductible health plan, you're going to be eligible to get a type of savings account called a health savings account. And what that account is for is you can take a portion of your salary and put it into this account and use it to buy things like contact lenses, anything that's health related. Go to get a personal trainer, get some procedures in the future. If you want to get braces, whatever it may be, you go to that account. And if there's a copay that you have to pay for, if you're trying to get it's 2024, if you're trying to get a BBL, like you use that money to pay for a portion of that amount, right? And there's some tax protections for that. But in this account, if you decide not to use that money for anything health related, you could also invest that money also. So that's another opportunity that you can use that for retirement. In order to find out about this program, you need to go to your human resources department and ask them. Or you go to whoever is in charge of your health insurance plan, and they can give you more options on this. But usually that HSA is going to be housed at like a bank firm, maybe even a credit union. And this is pre-tax money. And then last but not least, and actually I really even shouldn't say this is last, but there's a brokerage account, right? Everybody who doesn't know what this is, I'm talking about when you see people on their phones and they're using Robinhood to invest, or they're using some type of app to invest, or whatever it is. You may hear people say, I use Charles Schwab or I use Vanguard. In essence, this is another account that you start on your own, and you just start putting some money in there, and you are investing in various different things, and you're just looking for your money, once again, to be working as hard as you are working. When you're operating, when you're sleeping, this money is in the stock market and it's doing some work that you really want it to do. You're going to go to a bank, you're going to go to a financial firm, you're going to find this out. And this is all after tax money. Okay. So once again, these are the 4 ways I think for investing towards retirement that you can do as a broke resident, right? Remember, whatever is at your residency, usually it's a 403B. You can start your own retirement account, which is a Roth account, and health savings account. Those who may be in great shape or don't think that they see the physician a lot, they may get a high deductible health plan, which will make you eligible to get a health savings account, and then also getting a brokerage account, right? So you may be looking back to me and saying, listen, doc, like I spent a lot of time like not taking risks in med school. And I know that, you know, if you take a risk like with a patient's lives, that's a problem, right? Aren't these stock market investments, and isn't that risky? And I'm going to tell you, yes. Everybody's going to tell you yes. It is risky. But you know what also is risky? Not doing anything, right? I'm going to say that again. Investing in the stock market can be risky, but also what is also risky is not investing for retirement, because you're going to need an income from somewhere, right? So you'll learn in residency, you know, that there's going to be a lot of differences of how people present in the textbook versus how they present in real life. And a lot of times things aren't black and white. Things are going to be gray. And there's going to be certain risks that you take with treating someone versus some risks that you're going to have to take if you don't treat the person, right? And you present that to the patient, and then they make a decision off of that, right? It's the same thing here with the stock market, right? Once you really start to understand, we're not going to get into the depths of that. Once you really understand the stock market, you'll be able to make an educated decision. You'll be able to make an educated move towards deciding if you want to participate in that. But also know, if you decide to put your head in the sand and not take action, that could be just as risky, if not more risky, than taking action. So you see that guy right there? That's me. That's me in my bouffant. Even though I'm bald, I still wear a bouffant in the operating room. But that's me operating in Ghana, West Africa. That's me doing a medical mission work, right? And this is an environment that we call a low resource environment, right? They need surgeons. The amount of doctors to patients, that ratio is crazy large, right? So in these type of environments, you really got to know your stuff, right? There's not many specialties here, right? So you have a general surgeon who can do very traditional things. So you really got to be proficient in what you do, because in all honesty, there ain't no backup there, right? So you better know what you're doing. But operating here is the result of me doing many years of practice, including what I did on day one of residency. That's me writing soap notes. That's me, replacing potassium. That's me doing everything that I needed to do in residency, doing the case log, going above and beyond, doing a whole bunch of different cases. And then when I graduate from residency, I'm still operating and every day showing up, so that when I get to this point where I'm by myself and there's no help, I'm very proficient. Well, the same thing happens with your money. The same thing happens with investing in residency, right? Like, you don't want to make first-time decisions about what to do with retirement when you are making six figures and you haven't made any of those decisions. You haven't used those muscles at all. But when you are a resident and you're making five figures and the stakes are lower, that's the time when you put in the time to make those decisions to invest in certain various vehicles. You may make some mistakes, but you know what? It's all good. You're going to recover, so that by the time you're in attending and you do have a six-figure salary, you're not gun shy, excuse my language, but you're not scared to make a decision because you haven't practiced that before. So this picture on the side talks about compound interest. And as you can see, compound interest basically is if you have principal and you have interest, right? The interest is going to work on the principal. And then the next month, the interest is going to kick in on the principal plus that interest from the previous month. So you're going to get like this exponential growth of your money. Whereas with simple interest, it's just you have a principal and you have an interest, and it don't matter as long that principal is going to stay the same and that interest is just going to stay the same, and you're going to get that on a month-to-month basis, right? So when you are looking towards retirement, you got to remember that it's really important to start early, because the magic power of compounding interest can really help you when you get into your 40s, 50s, and obviously when it's time to retire. So you want your money to work really hard when you're young. You want it to work when you are sleeping. You want it to work when you're in your 30s and your 40s, right? This becomes almost like a locomotive, like a snowball effect, where it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And all you're doing is contributing small amounts because you started early. That's why it's really important to start when you're young. Now, if we get specific about the money, all right, let's change topics a little bit, right? Like Doc, I heard you about, the mindset and all that. You got me convinced. I start early. I got all that, right? But let's get specific about the money. How much money should I invest for retirement? So it's a tough one, right? It depends on those expenses all the way in the beginning. But once you hit like a steady state and you plateau, I think for starters, the majority of people should be putting away about 6%, right? That means that when you have your salary, 6% of your salary will go towards, let's say, your 403b at your residency plan, at your residency program, or you can do 3% to your residency program and another 3% will go to your IRA. But start at 6%. That's going to be a number that I think the majority of people won't, it won't bother them too much, right? And for me, I'll be honest with you, when I became a resident, I was making more than my mother, right, ever made as a resident, right? And this was in 2006, almost 20 years ago, right? So for me, living off of refund checks and off of credit cards and coming out to making more than my mom's make, and being able to pay back my student loans, yeah, like putting away 6% would have been something that I should have been able to do. But once again, I didn't do that. So that's why I say, and I give advice to most people, 6% is a good place. So if you're making $60,000 in salary, that comes out to about $3,600 a year. If you break it down per month, that's $300 a month that you're just shifting away and putting away towards retirement. Okay. And the goal is on a yearly basis, when you go from being a year one to a year two, there's going to be an increase in your salary. You know what you should be doing? You should be increasing the amount that you're putting away. So instead of 6% your first year, well, now that your salary is increased a little bit, try to go up to 7%, maybe 8%, if it doesn't bother you too much, right? If you can get up to 15%, that's amazing. I tell you right now, if you're up to 15% or even higher, like you're beating the average, right? You're doing amazing. But this is a way that you can really start to put something away without it necessarily breaking the bank or it being a monkey on your back. And then you can continue to grow at 1% on a yearly basis. Now, the last thing I'm going to say, this is the last slide, is there any other way that I can set up myself for retirement, right? And I would say, yeah, there's plenty of ways. But I think probably the next one after those 4 vehicles will be considering real estate investments, right? So what I'm talking about is let's say you decided to get a house, right? You may want to consider making it a rental property. So if you buy a house and you decide that maybe, like for me, I had a house that was a 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath. Once again, I should not have gotten it. But what if I decided to make the basement, rentable to other residents or to visiting medical students who are doing sub-Is? That would have been an opportunity for me to get rent from them. And that could decrease the amount of my mortgage that I'm paying for my mortgage, which means I can get a better couch, which means I can get a second couch. I can get a chair so that my mom and my dad can sit there and not feel uncomfortable, right? I'm only speaking from experience. This is really how it was for me, right? But there's other things that you can do in real estate, right? Or you can get into real estate that makes it a little less cost prohibitive. But I'll be very honest with you, when you decide to go into real estate, there's a huge hump possibly that you may have to get over, right? Like there's a big down payment that you may have to put down. There is some other expenses that you may have to put down that you may not be quite prepared for. But there's things such as syndications and there's REITs, REIT, which is a way that you can invest in real estate in the stock market that makes you able to dip your toe in real estate without having to necessarily get an actual physical home. So there are other ways that you can invest for retirement, and this is one of them also. So listen, that's the end. I'll be in the question Q&A area if anybody has any questions. But now that you guys know all this, I just hope that you guys are at least ready to consider investing for retirement while you're in residency. So that's me and my wife. That's our podcast right there, Docs Outside the Box. I hope you guys consider listening to us because that's where we talk real talk about finances and the mistakes that we made and us paying off a whole bunch of debt or me getting a house that I should not have gotten or my wife being chased down by the IRS. We talk about all that on the show. So.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Dr. Nee. That was great. I knew I would love that. And I appreciate you sharing that with all of us today. And if anyone has further questions you want to ask Dr. Nee, he's going to go into his breakout room, and you're welcome to go there and pose specific questions and learn more about things from his perspective. Also, I wanted to mention too, I meant to say this earlier, the the spreadsheet that many of you were asking about that Valerie Rivera shared with you during her presentation yesterday, it is now in the resources tab. Just wanted to make sure you know that that's under the first gen wealth template. So that's what that is. So if you're interested, you can download that link in the resources tab. All right, cool. Thank you very much, Dr. Nee. Thank you very much for taking the time and sharing your expertise with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, next is Ronnie Colvin, a certified financial planner. Now, on our schedule, we had Dr. Jordan Fry, a plastic surgeon. He was prepared to give a presentation. So Ronnie is substituting for him because we had some unavoidable scheduling issues. And so Jordan's not able to be with us today. He is sorry, and he really wanted to, and hopefully we'll be able to have him come on next time. Ronnie is going to be doing his presentation. And just so you know, some of it is like specific slides to like Jordan. So I know, I know, Ronnie, you're not going to be like pretending to be him. But the focus will be on the financial principles that he was going to share, and that Ronnie is he's a seasoned financial professional, and he's gonna share with you those things now, specifically specific steps that you as residents can take to work toward financial stability. So, Ronnie, we're looking forward to your part. Thank you.
Yes, I am. I am definitely not Jordan. Not a doctor. I can't stay on the side of blood myself, so medical school was not an option. And I didn't even stay at Holiday Inn Express last night. So that's how that goes. Um, he did, I said, provide a set of slides, as Tyler mentioned. So we're going to use those as his basis. Just remember that the face you're seeing ain't Jordan. Let me pull those up here. Hang on. Tyler, we are missing those. I mean, I have the slides, but I would have to quit Zoom and come back out to let you have it. So can you share those slides? Or do we want to bother with that? And I can just talk through it. You're muted, son.
Thank you. Thank you. If you can, it might be more under your control if you just talk through it.
That's fine. Not a problem.
Though, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Zoom
so
was not cooperating with me to share these slides tonight. It wants me to quit and come back. If you don't know who Jordan is, he runs a website and a podcast called The Prudent Plastic Surgeon. He's a plastic surgeon in Maryland, I believe it is where he's at now. He's from Buffalo, New York. But anyway, he's got a podcast and a website, and he does a lot of financial education for the medical profession as well under that Prudent Plastic Surgeon branding. He has a particular story that I will let him tell about how he turned his net worth around from a negative $450,000 in the hole to a positive $400,000 before he got his first paycheck as an attending, which is an amazing turnaround. He's done a lot of work on his financial education, everything as he was going through this. So we'll have to get him back at some point to tell that particular story. But it's probably also on his website. But he wanted to talk about 12 steps to financial freedom for young physicians. And a lot of it is.
Hey, Ronnie, I actually found a way that I could share if you would like, and I can just click when you want me to go to the next one.
As you like, whatever you want to do, if you think it would be useful.
Okay.
I am currently on the prerequisite page.
It's
One
not
more.
showing.
Back up one more. There you go. So I'm just gonna go ahead and close mine then, and we'll start from yours. So some of these topics that we'll cover here are things that we've mentioned in passing last night in some of the talks that we've had before. And some of it's we've talked a little bit about tonight with Jeremy and Dr. Nee, in a little more detail, possibly, as some of these come and go. Life insurance is his first one. I mentioned is just term. There are multiple forms of life insurance. Courtney referred to it in her talk as don't ever get whole life insurance. But particularly if you've got a family, a young family that you're starting off with, some kind of protection, and term is the least expensive way to do it to get the pure insurance function. If you die, your family gets paid. That is the basics of term insurance. There's no fancy investment options with whole life or variable life. There's no cash accumulation. It is the least expensive way to do it, particularly in residency when your money's tight anyway. Disability insurance. Now, Jeremy was talking about this. Your own occupation insurance, whether you get it through the GSI or whether you get an own occupation later afterwards, if you're eligible to get that. But again, absolutely protect your earning power should something happen to you. He definitely got into some of that. Particularly, I thought the example he made of if you're a surgeon, think about a neurosurgeon whose specialty is working inside the brain with a scalpel. And you can't do that anymore because you develop some early onset Parkinson's, you develop a shake in your hand. You can't do that work. The own occupation is what kicks in to protect you there. Now, there are other versions of disability insurance that are modified. Own occupation is one of them. And then the least expensive is any occupation where you could go do any kind of work. If you don't mind going and doing clinic work, if you can't do surgery anymore, then great. But if you want to be protected for what you studied to do and what you did, own occupation is the way to do it. Malpractice insurance, of course, that's one all of you have to deal with at some point. In a lot of cases, you get that through your program. You get that through even through private practice. You get it as a group plan, but you can also get it as an individual. But if you actively practice, you're going to need it one way or another. The umbrella insurance, nobody's mentioned yet. And that's something that Tyler and I talk a lot about. But umbrella insurance is a liability protection policy that protects you for not only sometimes mistakes, medical mistakes, but that's what malpractice is for. But in your personal life, if you have kids that are driving age and they hurt someone in a wreck, the lawyers are coming for you and for your assets and for your money. And the umbrella policy is the part of the shield that protects those and pays those claims should you be judged at fault for that. It's incredibly inexpensive for the amount of coverage it gets, but it's definitely something to consider. It rides on top of your homeowners and auto policies, which are generally where your liability protections are for personal things. Next. Click. One of his recommendations is to educate yourself and invest in your own education outside your specialty to protect your financial life and learn about what else is going on. Reading one financial book a year, reading a financial blog or post or something like that a day, and a podcast once a week, just to keep up with it, because it does change. The financial world changes with government regulation. It changes with programs that companies put out. What Dr. Turner was talking about with Ohio Life getting out of the disability game. All those kinds of things happen and they get announced in these blogs and podcasts and things like that. So if you want to keep up with that kind of thing, some sort of continuing education is necessary. Click. Knowing your why, and this is true in the medical profession or any other. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? What are you saving and investing for? And that money is just a tool to achieve these things, particularly here in the States where pretty much everything revolves around your income and your investments. And you got to pay for everything. We're not lucky enough to live in a country that has nationalized health system and lots of social supports and things like that. So being able to save and invest to be able to pay for those things as you go through life and get older, retire and everything, that money is the tool to do that. So knowing how to use that tool is important for you. But why you're doing it, whether it's the family or church or charity, anything else like that, knowing why you're doing it is incredibly important. Again, these are his slides to start with. And so some of this is his personal information, but he wanted that time with his family and his friends and everything. And to be able to enable that, he needed to know how to use his money and do it on his own terms. Next. Keeping score. Yeah, net worth. The big number is net worth. Your accumulation of assets minus your liabilities, what you owe at any given time. A different TV personality would say what you own versus what you owe produces your net worth. And you're looking for that number to grow every year. Once you get out of school and you're in residency, you're actually getting paid something. You want that to grow. But that's how you keep score with it. You watch that track on net worth. Hopefully the trend is up, and that's the plans, particularly as you get out of residency and into higher earning positions, that number is generally growing pretty well. Next. Bad debt. Consumer debt typically is what he's referring to with this. Credit cards, loans for TVs and all kind of things like that that you can accumulate that are monstrous interest rates. If you thought your HELA statement had 6.5% and 7% interest rates on your student loans was bad, 29.9% interest on the TV you just bought, the 70-inch TV, is really egregious, but it's all over the place. There was a time in years past where your credit cards could be 7.9% for a long time, or 9.9. Not anymore. So if you don't pay that thing off every month, it will rack it up. And as he said here, I love this. If you're in a hole, stop digging. And if you don't get rid of that high-end consumer debt, that high interest rate consumer debt, you just keep digging yourself a hole. Next. The spreadsheet Tyler was talking about earlier. Valerie Rivera last night had a budget spreadsheet for residents to use. And that's in the resources tabs talking about, but this is exactly what he's talking about here. You got to know what's coming in and what has to go out, your needs, rent and power and all the other good things you actually have to exist. But that budget is where it happens. Now, a lot of people don't like that word budget. Some people want to call it a spending plan to make it sound better. It is what it is. Whatever word you call it, you've got to know where your money's coming in and where it's going out to, so that you can apply it effectively. If you don't know that, that's how you get behind a lot. If you don't know that you're spending $500 a month eating out, but you're not paying attention, you need to learn that. Next. Saving 20% of gross income. Dr. Nee, before Dr. Darko, I guess Nee's his first name, was talking about saving 6% for retirement. Yes, absolutely. Whatever you can get to, sometimes 6%, sometimes as low as 3% is the minimum you get for your 403B match. So you get some of that free money from the employer. But saving 20% of gross means you got to go back and look at what the paycheck starts with, not what it is after the deductions. Gross and net check are two very different things. If this is your first job, you might be seeing one of these for the first time, unless you worked as a teenager. But yeah, your gross income is before taxes, before all those other deductions. Your net income is what's left. His step here is to save 20% of gross. Depending on what your financial situation looks like, that may be difficult to do. But eventually, as your earning power increases, that will be more doable. But do what you can, aim for 20%. Next. Yeah, the asset allocation and what to invest in. Now, he doesn't go into any detail here, and we're not going to pick stocks or pick investments or anything else like that. But what he's recommending here is really what you'll sometimes read if you are do some of the podcasts or blogs or anything like that, is something of a passive investment scheme, in that you don't try and pick individual companies or individual bonds or real estate or anything like that. Pick an index fund, sometimes even what's called a target date retirement fund, that looks forward into the future and will handle all that for you. Because you don't have to think about it. It's what the old commercials would tell you about: set it and forget it. Pick when you're going to turn 65 or 60, whenever you want to, and find a target date fund to hit that. And that's good enough for now until you have more time and more money to invest, typically once you've left residency. The allocation is set for you automatically. It knows by picking that particular target date, it knows when you're going to retire. So it has a change in allocation as you get older. But you don't even have to think about it beyond that point. Most all 403B and 401k plans have a selection of these in there as part of the default menu of options that are available to you, along with a few individual ETFs and mutual funds. But you'll typically see them as, Vanguard Target Retirement 2050, 2055, 2060. Pick the one that's right for you based on your age and your target retirement year. Allocate your 100% contribution to it, and don't think about it for a couple of years until you're in a different position. Next. Keep going. There we go. Investing in the right places. He's describing a waterfall plan here where you start putting money, and then as you develop excess, as your salary increases, as your compensation overall goes up, and you fill one bucket, which bucket do you go to next? His description here is start with your retirement accounts, your 401k, your 403b, your 457. Whether you're doing that if the plan has options available for both traditional and Roth components, or whether it's traditional only. There are some nuances to this first portion, because the 401k and 403b have the traditional, sort of like an IRA, that the money is taken out pre-tax. Early on, that can have an impact on your student loan payment calculations. If you're doing an income-based repayment plan, the lower the taxable income, so if you've contributed to your 401k in the traditional side first, your income might suddenly become low enough to where your income-based repayment plan doesn't jump, at least not too badly anyway. And you can play that game for a couple of years until your income gets really high, and then that's not really an option anymore. But still, that's part of that nuance for the retirement account. Your backdoor Roth conversions that were talked about earlier, about that possibility, there's some nuances to that as well, but that's also an option. Your health savings account, and I remember a question about this earlier, that is it is actually a savings account. It has an investment component to it. Unlike the FSA, which is an amount of money that's set aside to cover medical expenses during the year, and it's use it or lose it. If you don't use it in that year, it goes away. The HSA investments stay with you for life. You can continue to accumulate those, and there's some really cool things about that account we can talk about at some other point. And a taxable investment account, a typical brokerage account. Okay, next. This is very particular to you in terms of the contract that you get for residency, and then later on as an attending, depending on who you're working for, and optimizing your medical practice. That's not something I'm qualified to talk about. So we'll go ahead and move on from this one. Next. Side gig, side hustle. Now, depending on your what medicine you practice and the kind of time it requires of you, you may not have the brain power left to do a side gig. If you're doing emergency medicine, your hours are all over the place, your shifts are all over the place, and it's just amazingly draining. If you're doing something that's a little more stable and you've got some mental capacity left at the end of the day, then a side gig could be considered. Maybe that is the investing in real estate, to become a landlord or something like that for a small property. Get your toe in, that kind of thing. Go ahead. Spending intentionally. his rules here of the level of joy you get from the purchase and how big versus how big the price tag is. That's absolutely applies. It is a matter of analysis. You've got to think about what you're going to buy. What does it do for you? How much is it going to cost you? Some things are a matter of spending that are just quality of life things. Last night's session with Valerie talked about sticking some little amount of money in an account to take a vacation, even if it's just a 3-day weekend that you drive to somewhere else just to get away for a while, some small amount of money. But to give you some kind of relief, a little bit of joy, whether it's a vacation or dinner out, whatever it happens to be, but judge it versus the price tag versus and how much joy it brings you to do it. Go ahead, Donna. Now, I don't know if these are his cars or not. If they are, more power to him. But apparently that's what he likes. So, and his house. Most of us are familiar with the keep it simple, stupid principle. You have what he calls complexifiers. That's not a word I knew about. I've never heard that one before, but yes, it's still a matter of don't overcomplicate things if you don't have to. Most of this is fairly straightforward. There are some nuances to certain decisions for an individual situation, but overall, saving for the retirement plan, saving for your medical expenses and future life, housing and kids and everything else like that. And the investment component can be very simplified. The target date fund can be a good choice, or a very simple, sort of stock bond allocation with some simple ETFs in your 401k. It does not have to be complex. Now, I don't know what a DIEP is. So for his third point, now a rhinoplasty, I understand. If you can do these things, you can figure out how to manage your finances. So, and I would agree with him. Next. This is a lot of what Tyler and I both, and Courtney and Valerie from yesterday, and I believe we've got somebody coming up next. Planning, creating your financial goals, setting targets for yourself, and prioritizing. We do a lot of work where we call it needs, wants, and wishes. Needs is what do you have to survive? We got to have food and shelter, and clothing, electricity, all those kinds of things that are basic subsistent things. Wants, and that's sort of the next intermediate level. And then wishes, there's pie in the sky stuff. I want to buy an Italian villa and retire when that kind of thing. But you have to know these you have to define them, set a time frame to them, set a number to them. If I want to buy that, Tesla Model 9, how much does it cost and when do I want it? Okay, now how long is it going to take me to get there? And I'm going to sock that money away in a special account or whatever and plan for it. But you have to build that plan and then take action on it. Go ahead. Oh gosh, yes. Prudent plastic surgeon again, because he's got blog posts and things like that to describe a lot of this. But this is actually a really pretty good list for him. And it works for a lot of people. If you've got a debt that's more than 8% interest rate, knock that thing down. That's his get out of the hole point from earlier. Your emergency fund. Any planner, anybody in finance will tell you, have some cash set aside, because the last thing you want to do is have your newborn or your kid need to go to the pediatrician for something if they took a fall on the playground set in the backyard, and you got to put that on a credit card. If you're doing first step number one and paying that kind of thing down, you don't want to turn around and recreate it because you didn't have some cash put away in that emergency fund. The voluntary defined contribution plan he's talking about, that's the 401k and 403b and that kind of stuff. It's voluntary on your part, and you're defining how much you're putting in there. Vetted real estate, that is a topic for another time, because that can get really complicated if you're going to start investing in real estate, particularly directly. Dr. Darko mentioned that in his talk just before me. It is absolutely an option for building wealth, but there are things about it, whether you're doing it the REIT direction, which is a market-based investment and is very hands-off, or you're actually buying a property. and you get to be the landlord, and you get to be taking the phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning. It says the toilet won't quit running. You may not want that. You may want to discuss things like property managers or whatever. All that has different nuance to it, but it is certainly something to consider. The 529s for college, if you have kids, you want to plan for that. All these other steps down the line is sort of an order of operations for saving and investing. And it's a pretty good list. Next. And that
All right. Well, that was those are some good insights. Thanks for conveying that for us, Ronnie. I know it was very last minute, and I appreciate you stepping up to offer that. Now, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask Ronnie, he's going to go into a breakout room. You could ask further questions of him. Thanks again, Ronnie. Really appreciate it. Now, let's see. I need to make sure I get this taken down here. Okay, so this is now we're going to talk with Dr. Spath, also known as the Frugal Physician. She has a podcast in addition to her work as a physician. And I really appreciate your part that you're going to share. We're delving into a lot about investing today because if you haven't realized it yet, it is very, very important. But it's very, very scary too if you've never done it and you don't know a lot about it. And so we want to give multiple perspectives on this. And so we're looking forward to what you have to share, Dr. Spath. So please take it away.
Thank you. Okay, can you see my screen okay? All right, let's get a slideshow and let's get this started. All right, guys, my name is Dr. Disha Spath. I'm a practicing internal medicine physician and the founder and CEO of The Frugal Physician, like Tyler said. I love that I'm going after the prudent plastic surgeon because we share the same penchant for alliteration. My presentation is going to be echoing a lot of a couple of the presentations that have already gone, and hopefully we can get a bigger and maybe even a more dive a little bit deeper into some of these topics and get you some perspective from a lot of different sides, but I really wanted to talk today really deeply about investing because when I moved here, when I was 10 years old to the United States from India, I was raised by a teacher, and the ethos in our family was basically work hard, try to make as much money as possible and spend wisely and maybe save a little. But investing seemed like something that other people did, something that rich people did, and we were not rich. And so when I started making money as an attending, all of this was really kind of foreign to me. It was intimidating. And if you are in that boat right now, I want to spend some time really clarifying this for you. When I started learning about finance, I read a ton of books, and I'm going to be sharing some of the concepts from my favorite books with you so that you guys can get a quick preview of investing without having to read all those books. Although I completely recommend deep diving at some point. And like Jeff said, we read one financial book a year. So let's dive into it. What is investing? Well, like I said, when I started, I thought spending time working a shift was making money, right? I would have to spend my time to work that shift and then I would make money. But investing is actually making your money work for you and buying back your time. Does that sound a little hokey? It did to me, but it's actually completely possible. It's not just for the Rockefellers. It's open to anyone willing to do it. What really brought this concept home for me was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And this graph here basically summarizes what that book has to say. So the book is about a rich dad, a dad who seems to have no worries and tends to have unlimited money and lots of time to achieve things, and the poor dad who has a good job but tends to always be worried about money. And As you've worked the wards, I'm sure you have noticed that some attendings tend to be more stressed out than others about money. Some attendings tend to be very, just grinding really hard, working a lot of shifts, worried about money, taking some vacations and maybe spending it, and then coming back and being really stressed out about working and maybe losing their joy in medicine a bit. And then I'm sure you've seen the doctors there too that seem a little bit freer, seem to be able to balance their lives a little bit better, and seem like they have their financial lives together. And at first, I didn't understand the difference between that, that maybe some of them just started off rich, but that's not actually true. This is how it actually works. The trap doctor has the job that brings in the salary, but that salary goes to pay for liabilities like mortgage, credit card, student loan debts, car loan, and the expenses, things that we have to spend money on like groceries, childcare, utilities, and the things that we can spend money on like vacations and restaurants. But in the end, all of the money that he earns goes right back out the door. In contrast, the free doc has a job and it brings in a salary, but he takes some of that money uh, and invests it into assets. Assets are things that make money for you, like stocks, bonds, real estate, intellectual property, other companies. But the important and key part is that he keeps his liabilities and expenses to a point where there's room to make a room for investing. And as you continue to invest that money, and that money then starts making you money, you get less and less dependent on your job. And you get multiple sources of income. And that's the formula of financial wellness and of wealth. And it's possible for anyone. So, how do we make money work for us? Well, I used to think that retirement saving was kind of boring, and I certainly didn't want to think about it when I was just starting off my career. I wanted to work and didn't want to think about ending it. But retirement savings is actually pretty key. But I used to think that it used to be that is just simple interest. And and Nee mentioned this earlier. I used to think it was just $2,000. If you saved $2,000 a month for 35 years and you were earning 6% interest on it, that you just multiplied those things together. Take all your principal, multiply it by 1.06 and get $890,000. Not that that's a small sum, but that seems kind of boring. But actually, it's much more exciting than that. Investing works with compounding interest. So that means that whatever principal you invest then earns money that month. And that interest that it earned then comes back to your principal, and then your principal is bigger. And the next month you add more money. And all of that earns more interest and continues to grow in an exponential fashion. That time in years is actually in the exponential position in this formula. So this graph demonstrates that. So the blue line is your total contributions, but the red line is the actual value of your account. And as you can see, it's starting to take off. If you've lived through the COVID pandemic, you know how exponential curves work. You remember in 2020, the COVID numbers were just sort of petering along and we all shut down. And then right after we came out of the shutdown, we were like, okay, and all of a sudden, whoo, took off, right? Those numbers just take off. And that's exponential math. The exponential curve takes off after a while, but it takes a little time to build up. So that's why investing early is really important. Take this example of investor one. She's 25 years old and sets aside $5,000 a year for 10 years in a row and then doesn't put in anything else and just lets that grow. Whereas investor two starts 10 years later at 35, invests $5,000 each year for 30 years in a row until reaching 65. Who has more money? The person who put away that money earlier. This is the power of time in market. This is why it's so important that you as residents start thinking about this now. Certainly you could think about it later, but it will be harder. It'll be much easier if you start now and get that compounding working for you so that those numbers start to tick up and the interest upon interest really starts to build on itself early in your career. I wish I had known this. I didn't start investing as a resident. So I want you to do it because you'll be much farther ahead than me. So how can you get started? Well, first we have to talk about taxes. I know, again, kind of sounds boring. And as a resident, you're not going to be paying all that much tax. But as you become an attending, taxes become a big part of your life. In this example, a couple married filing jointly with an income of $200,000 will pay almost $65,000 in taxes every year. That's a lot of tax. But the good news is that the US tax system was made to give you a tax break for doing things the government wants you to do. And one of them is to save for retirement. Why? Because they don't want a whole bunch of old people that don't have any money that they have to support, right? If you save for yourself, they like that. So they give you a tax break. So before we understand how big of a deal this is, we need to understand how things get actually taxed when we are investing. So say you just have a taxable brokerage account. The money that you put into it is taxed on initial investment, meaning if you're saving the money out of your paycheck that's already been taxed once. Then that investment is taxed on its growth. So if your investment is throwing off any dividends, that gets taxed every year. And then when you decide to withdraw the money, you get taxed again. So you're getting taxed 3 times on your brokerage account. However, your retirement account, which is basically a brokerage account, except you have tax protection and some limitations. Your retirement accounts get a tax break in 2 spots. The pre-tax investments that you can opt to put in do not get taxed initially, so that the money gets taken out of your paycheck from your gross pay before the taxes get added in. So this lowers your taxable income. The money is not taxed as it grows in your account. It's only taxed at withdrawal. Roth, on the other side, you get taxed initially. So the money gets taken out after you've paid your taxes on your paycheck, but the money grows tax-free and is never taxed again, even when you withdraw it. So it's nice to have a little bit of both kinds of money in your account for retirement. And whether you choose Roth versus pre-tax depends on your situation and a lot of other things, right? It's a depends kind of situation. But know that when you're choosing, you can most people choose pre-tax in the really high income years where they feel like they are in a higher tax bracket than they would be in retirement. Of course, nothing's guaranteed and the tax code can change at any time. But as far as the facts go now, most people are taxed less in retirement than they are taxed at their max attending earning years. And a lot of people do Roth in intern years resident years, because we're not earning as much. We're in a pretty decent tax bracket. And so we can afford to pay that money now and then not have any of that tax later as it grows. And then the HSA has been mentioned several times, and that's because it's such a cool savings account because it's never taxed as long as the funds are used for healthcare expenses. Not taxed when you put it in, gets taken out of your gross pay, not taxed when it grows, and not taxed at withdrawal. So really a huge hack. Okay, now that we've talked about the different retirement options, the way you can put your money in, there are different accounts that are available to you. These have been mentioned before too, 401ks and 403bs. This is kind of a big picture view, and you'll have this available to you if you want to read through it in more detail. But there are accounts for employees. There are accounts for people that just earn income. You don't have to have an employer. Your employer does not have to supply that for you. You just go and sign up for it. And that's an IRA. And then there are high deductible health plans that come with HSAs. So as a resident, you really need to know about the Roth option. And well, the pre-tax option. If you have a pre-tax 401k or a Roth option from your employer, great. You have access to that. You can invest there. If you don't, that's fine. You can do an IRA and just open that on your own, and you can put away $7,000 a year into that as of this year. All right, so setting up retirement accounts. Whenever you start to invest, start with your tax advantage accounts. Why would you not take advantage of that tax break that the government's trying to give you? And, the thing is that once The government does put a limit on how much tax advantage money you can have in a year. And if you don't use it in that calendar year, that space is gone. So go ahead and use up that tax advantage account first. But remember, retirement accounts are just empty shopping carts. They're like just like a brokerage account. You need to fill them with investments. And like Ronnie said, you can just opt for a target date fund as a resident and let it ride and then learn about investing. I'm going to try to teach you a little bit about it now. So stocks are big picture of things that you can invest in your retirement accounts. First, stocks. Stocks are when you buy a part ownership of a company. So you're going to get a percent of the future revenue of that company. Bonds are loans that you give a company or a specific entity. They're guaranteed to be paid back at a certain percent of interest. So think student loans. That's kind of like a bond. Bonds are generally less risky for the lender. Mutual funds. Well, let's start with index funds. Index funds are low-cost collection of stocks or bonds, either one, designed to mimic the gains of an overall index like the S&P 500 without active management. So instead of trying to pick a stock, pick one winner that's definitely going to make you money and studying all the different stocks in the whole S&P 500, you just buy the entire thing. You buy a little piece of each company. And what that does, it gives you diversification. Instead of trying to pick the needle out of the haystack, you're buying the entire haystack. And so that you're vastly increasing your chances of success. Mutual funds are just like that, where they are a collection of funds, but instead of the entire market, a fund manager picks out certain stocks that might be good, that they think might be good, or bonds. And since it's directed by a fund manager, there are generally higher costs associated with these funds. And then ETFs are very popular these days. They're a cross between an index fund, which is like just a package, and a stock, which is, a single stock. ETFs are low cost generally, but they are traded daily like stocks. So anyway, these are the concepts you need to know in order to be knowledgeable about what's going on in your investing portfolio. Okay. So yeah, we're talking investments, we're talking making money work for us, but nothing comes from nothing, right? You need to pay for the gains that you're going to get, and you're going to pay that by taking some risk. There is risk in investing. However, it's not that risky. So let's take a look. This is the performance of the stock market until about 2010. You can see how the roaring 20s, the market really went up, and then we had the Great Depression. And then we came back up, and then we had the recession. Then we had the tech boom, and then we had the Great Recession again. But as you can see, the market has generally grown over time. Who lost their shirts? The people that sold at the bottom of the market. The people that freaked out at the bottom of the market and just pulled their money out. That's how you lose money in the stock market. If you can ride it out, and physicians are in a very advantaged position for that because we have pretty, stable jobs mostly, and and we have good incomes. So even if the stock market tanks, we still have a job that can bring in income. So we can ride out the market a lot better than other people. And so that's a huge advantage when it comes to investing, because there is some risk associated with it. If the market dips, you need to be willing to wait it out. So this is what you need to keep in mind while you're waiting it out. Despite the Berlin Wall coming down, despite the Iraq War, despite the coronavirus dip, the market has come back up. And the reason for that is as long as we have companies that are out there working, as long as we have a functioning Fed and a government that will protect our economy, then the market will most likely continue to grow. Of course, nothing is guaranteed, and past performance does not guarantee future results, but the risk is relatively low as long as our society exists the way it is, right? And if everything just blows up and there's a huge nuclear war, well, we're all going to be screwed anyway, and money's not going to matter. So you might as well, take some risk. And another reason to have to take this risk really is inflation. If you look at how $100 grew from 1971 to 2020, you can see that inflation in itself made that $100 actually need $655 to equal it. You're going to need $655 to equal the $100 of 1971. So if you don't invest and just save that money in a low interest savings account or under your mattress, your money is going to be worth less and less over time. So you can take risks by buying bonds, buying short-term investments, or stocks. But you can see stocks are a whole lot more volatile. And so that's why we have an asset allocation where we ask ourselves, how much risk am I willing to take? Well, if I'm risk averse, then I would have more bonds. If I like taking risk not that I like taking risk, but if I can ride out a dip in the stock market because I have a stable job and a good emergency fund, then I might take more risk. If I'm early in my investing career, I might take more risk. But if I'm closer to retirement, I might have more bonds because I don't want to take the risk of losing all of my investments. So it really depends on where you are in your life, and target date funds basically do this for you. They buy you more bonds as you age and buy you more stocks when you are younger. All right. The secret of investing is not timing the market. The secret is time in the market. So you just need to get in there and stay the course. And study after study has shown that if you just get in there, stay the course, hold investments over a long period of time, you're going to do a lot better than someone who's trying to time the market and sell high and buy low. That's just it. Human behavior does not let that work out. But trying to time the market is speculation. It's gambling. Trying to just invest, give your money to a company and let it do its thing. Give your money to all the companies and let them do their thing and grow your money. That's investing. Okay. I'm getting to the end of my time, so I'm going to tell you just about a few things to watch out for. Costs. Costs are the things that will eat up your investment return. So we're talking about financial planners and how people charge money. AUM fees can really affect your portfolio. So $100,000 that's invested and earning 6%, just $100,000, you're not adding anything else to it, is earning 6% a year for the next 25 years. If you had no costs, it would cost you $430,000. But at 2% a year in costs, it'll bring down the value of your portfolio by $170,000 and only be worth $260,000 instead. So you are taking away a lot of compounding power by just adding that 2%. So keep that in mind. Okay, these are all the kinds of things that you need to watch out for when you're looking at costs. Assets under management fees, of course. Expense ratios. That's how the expenses of a fund are expressed on the prospectus. So you want to take a look at that. Try to keep that low. You want to avoid loads. Those are sales commissions. Try to avoid the other fees like redemption fees, contingent deferred sales charges, and management fees on mutual funds if you can help it. All right, things you can do to get started right now. First, figure out how much money you can put aside to invest. Find out if there are any retirement accounts available to you. Like Nee said, call your HR. Find out if they offer a match. If they offer a match, definitely don't give that away because that is free money. Your employer is going to give you more compensation simply for saving for retirement. And then consider starting a Roth IRA. One exception is, if you're trying to lower your income for PSLF and lower your payment as low as possible, then maybe pre-tax. But Roth IRAs are good. And if you can do them in residency, they can really, really set you up for financial success. My name is Dr. Spath. I'm at thefrugalphysician.com. You can scan the QR code here. I also have a podcast called Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician. And the first few episodes, if you start at the beginning, lay out the foundation for all the stuff that you're going to need to know to have a healthy financial life in the future. Hope you come join us.
Thank you so much, Tisha. That was really great. I appreciate your perspective, and you have it's really cool to see how like a person like you, like how you've like learned over the years, and like you can you can really share like a gift with everyone. So that means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if any of you would like to ask Dr. Spath any additional information and additional questions, you can go to the breakout room that has her name on it. She's going to go over there now, and you can chat away. So now we have one more part that I'm going to be sharing with you, and it's going to be about the topic: should interns buy a home or rent? Now, if you have followed my attitude and expressions on Twitter for any length of time, you probably know that I err toward not buying the shorter your time frame is in residency. So like if you're going into family medicine, internal medicine, you know that like either you're going to leave that place or you know you're going to apply to fellowship and you know you're not going to have fellowship where you did internal medicine or whatever. I tend to say like be careful. But I also admit that there's a lot more to this than just, you know, the financial side to it. In fact, somebody even today, because I posted a question about making the case for it was Stacy. That's right. So she mentioned that even if you're going to lose money or break even with home ownership, renting is just like a no-go. Like, and that can definitely be the case. So I fully acknowledge that it's not just a money decision. It's there's a lot more to it. And so I wanted to discuss 4 things to consider in terms of whether you should buy a home or rent as an intern. The first is affordability. Affordability is it's critical to consider. So obviously, like if you're in a high cost of living area, it's going to be tough no matter what, even with renting. But like home ownership in like New York City or in LA or something like very niche like that, it's going to be very, very difficult to buy a home on a resident salary. But it does depend. When I say affordability, I'm really talking about the household income. So if you are single and you're relying exclusively on your resident pay, then your ability to save for and to be able to buy and afford a home will be more limited than, of course, if there was a partner or spouse in the household that also earned an income. What you want to look at is essentially, the rule of thumb used to be like 2.5 times your gross income. So in that case, we're talking like on a $60,000 salary, we're only talking like $150,000 as a purchase price. That is very, very hard to come by. There's some parts of the country that may meet that still. But with home price appreciation, I have been involved in discussions where it's like 3 times your gross income or 4, and you are stretching it. But the reason why those numbers come into play is not because it's like, oh, well, it's right or wrong if you're above that threshold or below it. It's just a guide based on what your take home pay is going to be. So, for example, if you are bringing home like $4,000 a month, which is fairly generous for many intern salaries, but if your net of tax, like after tax take home pay is like $4,000, and like the cost of living is going to be $2,000, and that happens to be like the purchase price happens to be like above that 3 times your income threshold or 4 times. It's not a right or wrong. It's just okay, this is what it's going to cost you. How are you going to fare with the remainder of your available income for, if you're talking about insurance, for food and gas, for daycare, if you've got kids, or like pet insurance, or all sorts of things. You have to build out that budget, like Valerie talked about yesterday, to see what it really costs you to live. And then you need to prioritize what is really going to help me to be content as possible, that I can have a safe place, that I can feel comfortable when I do get to go home, because you don't get you're so busy at work. So when you do go home, it's very important that you be able to do your best to find a place where you can be safe and where you can feel comfortable, where you can actually rest and be refreshed. So assign priority to your money in accordance with that value system, whatever that is for you. And so affordability coupled with your priorities is the first thing. So if you know what your take home pay is, you can go to like, bankrate.com and just start typing in like mortgage rates, and like the interest rates are like 6.5%, 7% right now. And you can put in hypotheticals and you can see what it will, pan out to approximately. But there's more to home costs than just the mortgage rate. There's there and when I say mortgage rate, sorry, what I mean is the principal and the interest that you're paying. You also have insurance and you have taxes that have to be paid, and those calculators online can input some hypotheticals, but it is unique to each home, how old the home is. Like, we bought a home that's like built in 1926, and the insurance is like a lot more than what we were paying on a home that was built in the 1970s. So it varies. And the taxes vary by municipality too. So you need to be mindful of those varying costs that will be with you, that have to be put into your budget. So if you can figure out the affordability and you can figure out a price range that would work for your budget, now that's the first one. That's the first thing that you've passed. The second is comparing it to rental costs. There's some places where rent is really expensive compared to buying. And if like the mortgage rate, the mortgage that you're paying, insurance, taxes, and maintenance is less than what you'd pay on rent, then that weighs in favor of purchasing the home. I mentioned maintenance. One way to estimate maintenance cost is 1% of the purchase price per year. It's an approximate, it's going to vary, but you could input that into your budget as an approximate cost. So yeah, you want to compare it to renting. Third, how long you're going to be there. And I wanted to share something with you. And this was actually posted by Dr. Turner earlier today, this Zillow white paper on cost of, let's see, I'll get that here. Yeah. The cost of, buying versus renting. And I just wanted to share this graphic with you because as mortgage rates have gone up, the break-even point at which it's more expensive to rent has gone farther out. Before, when mortgage rates were at 3%, the break-even point was about 2 years and a couple months. Now it's a little bit over 4.5 years, where between year 0 and 4.5 or 4.7 years, it is more expensive to buy a home. And the major reason for that is because with the higher interest rates, payments are higher. You pay the majority of your payment during the early years of a 30-year mortgage. The majority of that is the interest. And so because interest rates have gone up, payments have gone up, regardless of what the exact purchase price is. Even if you bought a $250,000 home today versus 4 years ago, it's going to be much higher because the interest expense. And so it behooves each of you to, it doesn't make it a bad decision. You just need to realize what you are committing to. You are accepting the risk of higher expenses in order to be in a home that you own versus renting. And that might be best for you, but you need to go into it with both eyes open so that you can make that decision intentionally and not get surprised by things that may come up later. And things that may come up later could be that your house doesn't sell as fast, or you end up having to break even, or maybe you even have a bit of a loss. Now, historically, that does not happen very often. And so I'm not trying to be a fearmonger and saying like, oh, there's a big chance that like your house is going to be worth $50,000 less in 3 years. I don't believe that's going to happen, but it is not impossible for real estate values to go down in a short term. So you just need to be able to accept that risk and know, yeah, it's still worth it for us. Now, if you're if you're like in like a 5-year program, or like I know some like a good friend matched into neurosurgery in the Midwest, and she's going to be there forever, not forever. Sorry, I don't mean to be, yeah, it does take a while, but if she's going to be there for at least 7 years. And so then it's like, well, buying a home makes a lot more sense in that case. So that's why how long you're going to be there matters. The third factor, if you're of the disposition, and who was it? Who was it that just said that? Oh yeah, Gamer EM Doc. He actually replied to my question about making a case for buying a home for a 3-year residency. He mentioned a good point. You can convert that into a rental property, and it is very likely that you're going to have a predictable stream of people in a similar income bracket, people that are in med school now who are coming up behind you, or even pre-med, that may want to rent your property that you own because it is close to the hospital, and that all makes sense. So there is a case for making it into an investment property, but this is a business. There is a lot of people who talk about real estate and they associate it with passive income. And when you hear the term passive, it sounds like it's not much work. And that is not true. So it's really important that you understand that if you are going to take on the mantle of landlord, and even if you outsource property management and you hire an accountant to take care of the books, all that stuff, in the end, you are starting a business. And if something breaks or if something needs to be addressed, those people are going to be there to advocate for you, and you can delegate to them. That does help. But not only does that cost you money, which reduces your profit, but it does help you with like stress if you feel like you have a team of people helping you with your rental properties. But even so, you are the owner and you are starting a business. So if you are okay with that and you want to take that on, go for it. That's great. But don't think for a second that it is passive activity whatsoever. So if you get to the end of your 3-year program, or even if it's like 4 or 5, and you're going to, you're deciding, well, real estate property values have not gone up or they're even, and I'd like to rent it, that might be a good solution for you, but it is turning into a business. You are becoming a business owner. So just, again, it's about intentional decisions. Make sure that you are okay with that. If you are married, or if you have a significant other that you could be married and you're going to be, both of you are going to be affected by this decision, make sure that it is a jointly decided upon decision, so that you both can be like, all right, this is what we're doing. These are the risks. These are our decisions that we will make if A, B, and C happens, so that you can at least be prepared for unexpected things. And then the last bit is the intangibles. Similar to what some people have mentioned to me in the past, you've got like I know a lot of people who are parents, especially like non-traditional graduating med students. If they've got kids and they're like, we don't want to live in an apartment. I got a 6-year-old, and like I want them to have a yard. They can run around, and I don't have to be like going out of the apartment building and taking them to a park somewhere. And I totally get that. So that's in association actually with that first point too, is affordability relative to how you're prioritizing things. So if you can do that, if you can address that in accordance with those 4 things, or I should say 5 things. 5 things: affordability, comparing to rent costs, how long you're going to be there, knowing that you may be starting a business if you do convert it to a rental, and then the intangibles. And those matter a lot too. So just if you consider those things, then you can make the best decision in association with your personal circumstances and where you're going. So that's what I wanted to share with you all. Let's see. Yeah, that will actually conclude what we're going to talk about today, because I ran overtime a little bit. I appreciate your patience. But yeah, I'll conclude now. And so tomorrow is our last day, and Dr. David Roney is going to be talking about managing credit scores and discussing good borrowing practices. And then Dr. Patel, he's going to talk about how to protect yourself from the financial industry and the physician finance space. And then Michael Relvis, a a disability insurance expert specifically with physicians, is going to be speaking more on disability insurance. Let's see. And then Anna's going to be talking about moonlighting. She, a friend and financial planner. She's going to be talking about managing taxes if you're going to be moonlighting someday. And then I'm going to be concluding with giving you some step-by-steps on how to write your own personal financial plan. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I appreciate your interest and look forward to seeing you tomorrow night.